From this to this, and from this to that. Five Nights at Freddy's is broken. But there's still time to fix it. Over the past 5 years, there's been a decline in the public image of FNAF, which has only seemed to increase with each game's release, and in response, the fanbase has received a lack of answers to a lot of unanswered questions that only Scott or Steelwool could truly answer. And as much as I love this franchise with all my heart, there is so much that needs to be changed for FNAF to return to the high status that the fanbase once held these games to. There have been so many issues that have affected these newer and more recent games, from buggy releases to just an overall lack of any promotional material, but it never used to be like this. So how did we get here? I wanted to sit down and cover how Steelwool started working with FNAF, where it all began to go wrong, and how there's still time to fix it. So let's talk about the current state of FNAF. Let's start in very late 2018, when we were introduced to the pillars of what would become modern FNAF. Scott had just finished up his work on Ultimate Custom Night before teasing in his Steam post that a VR port of the FNAF series was coming to fruition, and that he had a full studio developing the project, Steelwool Studios, who marketed themselves as a game development company that specialized in virtual reality projects. Although they were a decently small crew for such a large IP, Scott must have seen something special in them at the time, because they were now working on adapting FNAF's earliest games into fully immersive and interactable VR experiences. March 11th, 2019. Scott would post a brand new teaser on scottgames.com showcasing a bit of the new poster for the VR release of the game, although just a couple of hours after posting this teaser, it had been removed from the website. It turns out that Steelwool had used fan-made renders in the official poster, so Scott took it down until they made a brand new poster with the official renders. At this point in time, people just wanted to see what the game would actually look like, and it wouldn't take us long to finally get some glimpses at what they'd been working on. As on the 25th of March 2019 at a State of Play, footage of FNAF Help Wanted would finally be shown to the fans, and people thought it looked great, especially considering this was the first FNAF game utilizing a proper 3D space. The idea of a FNAF VR game kept the community in a constant state of hype all the way until May 20th, 2019, when some of the largest FNAF creators on YouTube were given access to the game early to show it off. Fans absolutely loved these series and were more excited than ever to play the game on release, with FNAF Help Wanted still being held today as one of the best FNAF games available to date. And on May 28th, 2019, the game launched with little to no bugs, surprisingly. Fans enjoyed the VR port to its full potential and wouldn't have to wait long for the Curse of Dreadbear DLC to release either. Everything that came out for FNAF Help Wanted, including the Curse of Dreadbear DLC, ended up being flawless. So, when it was announced that Steelwool would be developing the next mainline FNAF game, people were excited. I mean, the fans had seen what they'd done with Help Wanted and couldn't wait to see what they'd cooked up in the background. And with a release date of just next year, the hype was at an all-time high. Well, what could possibly go wrong? Everything started to go wrong. Fast forwarding to 2020, Security Breach was just about to... okay. Moving on to early 2021, the game was... Oh, come on! The game finally released on the 16th of December 2021. After so much development time, people were expecting absolute perfection. That's not what happened. Security Breach was launched in quite a buggy state, with there being so many bugs in the game, like walls not loading or people just clipping through floors. Now, while the game was fun, it didn't excuse the vast amount of issues it had on launch, especially considering that the game had gone through 2 different delays to make sure something like this didn't happen. Another problem people had with Security Breach was how it seemed the story wasn't tied together cohesively. Some endings left huge plot holes that were never truly explained. Now, while the release of Security Breach was certainly a rocky road, over time things began to settle as bugs were patched out, and on May 22nd, 2022, Steelwool would post on Twitter that they'd started work on a brand new DLC for Security Breach titled Ruin. Not only did this poster seem significantly darker in tone than the base game. Also added at the bottom of the poster was text that stated this DLC was going to be free. Steel Wool seemed to create Ruin as almost an apology to the community, as if they knew that they had made a mistake with Security Breach and that they had to fight for the community's respect again. After a year of quiet development, Steel Wool unexpectedly released a gameplay trailer for Ruin, and it soon became the first FNAF trailer to hit YouTube's trending page. And it overall had a skeptical but mostly optimistic buzz regarding it. One final promotion on Twitter later, Ruin would officially come out on July 25th, 2023 for both PlayStation and PC, and the fans were certainly more than satisfied with this DLC compared to its base game. There were a lack of any notable bugs, no delays, and the game was tonally a lot more fitting with the FNAF franchise. Although some people argued it was lacking in story and length, Steel Wool had gained the trust of the community once again, and they'd already started work on the next FNAF game. And this game's effect on FNAF as a whole would represent a huge shift for the franchise that no one saw coming. Hey again! So, I may be trapped inside Glamrock Freddy's stomach hatch. It's a little cramped in here, but I'm fine. While I'm trapped in here though, I may as well add that my channel is currently at 19,000 subscribers, and I would love to be at 100k by the end of this year. So don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell. Also like the video while you're here too. Anyway, back to fearing for my life. Within the same week of Ruin's trailer, Steel Wool came flying out the door with a trailer for a Help Wanted sequel. Oh, nice. However, the first introduction to this FNAF game was completely overshadowed due to the release of Ruin's trailer. Oh, and what did this trailer show? The sister location elevator, and that's it. Seriously. But that's fine, it's just a teaser trailer after all. Although, we would not see gameplay for Help Wanted 2 for a quarter of a year where it was shown off in a Dorco video? Not even officially posted? On top of that, it would take another 2 months for an official gameplay trailer to be posted on Steel Wool's YouTube channel. And after a minimal amount of promotion on Twitter, the game came out on the 14th of December 2023. The day the game launched already introduced a good few problems too. One of them being that certain VR controllers just didn't work in the game. Rather than fixing the issue, Steel Wool shrugged and sent a tutorial for the community to fix the problem. Yes, this is still an issue for some controllers to this day. As for the game itself, fans saw it as a fun, although shorter version of the previous VR FNAF game, and it sadly failed to leave an impression on the franchise as a whole. The lack of promotion, a semi-buggy release, and no release on the MetaQuest headsets until months later seemed to pile up into FNAF Help Wanted 2 being forgotten by most of the community. With it being the first FNAF game that could be considered quite a flop, selling around a fifth of the first game's copies. In terms of copies sold, this was one of the lowest selling games in the franchise's history. But I guess you could say it was a spin-off, and VR didn't have the same hype around it that the original FNAF Help Wanted had. So it's fine if it didn't show a similar amount of sales. However, there was still a lot for Steel Wool to take away from this game's failure. They needed to promote their games better and iron out bugs before they even thought about releasing anything else. Although for 6 months, the community would be met with silence. On August 6th, 2024, nearing the end of FNAF's 10th anniversary, it was announced that Steel Wool were working on a brand new FNAF title, Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic. While not much was known about the game at the time, people were excited to see what Steel Wool had been working on and were hoping for better communication about future games to come. Fans were eager to get a look at the gameplay for this new game. What, you waiting for something? People would not see gameplay of Secret of the Mimic all the way until the next year on February 12th, 2025, when finally in a PlayStation State of Play, a short trailer was shown. Now, while not showing too much of the game, fans were happy as they'd finally seen what the game was actually going to look like, and they were given a release date of the 13th of June. But at that point, some of the damage had already been done as hype had significantly died down, instead being overtaken by fan songs. Steel Wool tried to recover the hype by posting little teaser images throughout the month of May all the way till June. But these were largely not seen by many people as they were posted exclusively to Twitter. With very little fanfare, FNAF Secret of the Mimic would make its way onto store shelves, and the overall reception was quite mixed. The game suffered from some bugs, but not too many, which was a plus. However, the story was certainly what left people feeling so caught up on their opinions. The incredibly confusing lore left a bad taste in most fans' mouths, and an even worse one for the theorists. It was very difficult to follow the lore it was trying to add, so newcomers or more casual players had no clue what was happening. Most players seemed to agree that the gameplay was quite an upgrade compared to Security Breach though. That's cool. However, once the community buzz had died down, something just kind of vanished. Until it soon came out as a VR release that was meant to come out with the base game. Yay! There were plenty of issues on the launch of this VR edition, but we'll start at the fact that Steelwall almost completely forgot to add that the game was a PSVR exclusive for the first month until just the final few hours before launch. Plenty of people bought Secret of the Mimic on PC and other VR softwares believing that they would be able to play, only to realize that they had been accidentally lied to. On top of this, for the few who actually had a PSVR 2, they had a terribly buggy and unoptimized experience with the game, with many people falling through walls, doors, floors, pretty much anything with collision. People flocked at any platform to complain to Steelwall, and they soon apologized for the lack of communication, but it was too little, too soon. Steelwall at the moment is no longer seen in the same light they were before, and there's still no quest mode for Secret of the Mimic VR. Let's take a step back real quick and retrace our steps all the way back to Security Breach. Out of the many faults that resulted in such a mixed bag when it came to reception of this game, one of the main issues at the center of debates around Security Breach has been the story, specifically how disjointed it was. Although this decline in storytelling could be shoveled onto Steelwall, there is one man above any writer or developer in the hierarchy of this series that no one can say no to: Scott Cawthon himself. It was revealed in a 2024 interview with Scott that his intentions for Security Breach were significantly different in the beginning, claiming that "my idea of how the game was going to go was misaligned with how things were going with Steelwall. I had a very specific story in mind, and it is very different than the one we got in the game. I thought I could do that without telling Steelwall the story plot." I still have no clue how he expected a full dev team to understand a story he didn't explain to them. When Scott took a step back from Steelwall to let them work on Ruin, the story became significantly more cohesive and understandable. I am not implying that Scott is a bad writer. He has made countless games in the past that have a complicated but functional story. He's created multiple iconic characters with equally iconic lines to follow, and I still get shivers when I listen to Henry's monologue at the end of FNAF 6. However, I believe he struggles to communicate the story he wants to tell when he doesn't have full creative control over the project, resulting in overhauls to the stories, animations, and gameplay that Steelwall didn't intend for or expect. In Secret of the Mimic, we've seen very similar issues in terms of the story and gameplay. Theorists were irritated, casual players were incredibly confused, and fans remained mixed in their opinions. On top of a forgettable launch for the base game, it's sadly not much of a surprise that this game has sold the least copies out of all the mainline FNAF titles. And on top of Secret of the Mimic underachieving in terms of sales, the VR port was a fatal blow to Steelwall's reputation that's been building up over the years of buggy releases and just poor communication. So, with all this in mind, what has caused this decline in the quality for FNAF over the past few years? I think the most accurate verdict is that it lies somewhere in between Scott and Steelwall, specifically how they communicate their ideas with each other. There seems to be a pattern in which Steelwall will begin developing an idea Scott recommended, Scott dislikes or changes an idea that results in last-minute changes to the story or gameplay. Steelwall then struggles to communicate and promote the games, resulting in the community lacking in media to discuss. When you combine all these faults in communication and possibly rushed development to catch up to changes in the story, your result is an unhappy group of fans. I believe that FNAF can be fixed in time. Yes, there are a lot of issues currently that have been deeply affecting the quality of the game's stories and gameplay, but these issues could mostly be fixed with clearer communication of ideas between Steelwall and Scott, which will hopefully lead to better communication with the fans. Scott and Steelwool have the liberty of not being a AAA studio, being that neither of them have investors to look up to, but they still have funding for developing pretty much any game they wish. With some slight changes and more marketing to these games, Steelwool and Scott could win over the community again, and in time, maybe there will be a chance that we will start seeing clearer, well-told stories that fans will regard in the same way they do with the original Scott games. Another solution could be to hire a community member like Dorko or Johnny Blocks to run the official FNAF Twitter accounts, promoting anything new that happens with the franchise. That way, people could be excited for a new FNAF game once again. And I'd like to believe that's what both Scott and Steelwool want, so we'll see. But I'll be waiting to see what happens next, and specifically, if there's a change. So no, I don't think it's too late to save FNAF. Hey, before you go, thank you all so much for watching until the end of the video, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And before you leave, I want to thank you all for helping me hit 19,000 subscribers. That number is insane. Oh, and don't forget to follow me on both Twitter and Instagram, as I've started to become more active on there as well. But to keep this short, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye everyone.